How about you though? And we'll switch.
Then we'll switch.
Okay. So. All right. That's the house. Yes.
You're vaccinated, unvaccinated. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Education USA Ukraine Thursday webinars. We are really happy that you joined us tonight. And I hope you're all doing fine, well, and healthy. And I'm happy to introduce our guest first. We have two wonderful guests today, Dr. Phillip Bailey, the Associate Vice President for International Education and Engagement at the University of Central Arkansas. And we also have Matthew Smith, the Designated School Officer and International Admission Counselor at the University of Central Arkansas. And today we will speak about universities and majors in the terms of the right choice, because like we know that the United States, they the country #1 that attracts international students around the world, and you are maybe now just started your way toward the American university, and you're looking for the information on how to choose your university, how to choose your major, what you need to start on looking for, and our guests will share a very useful insight on how to do that, and they will share the information for you today, and they will also speak about the various scholarships that might be offered by the universities or other organizations. So I'm I will stop talking and I'll probably give the floor to who is going first? Dr. Bailey, I believe, right? Dr. Bailey, you are welcome. Welcome in Ukraine.
Alrighty, we if I wanted to show the PowerPoint to start, would that be just?
I think we already have
just click on a button. Yeah, very good. All right, thank you for joining us this evening. Of course, for us, it's in the morning, and we're going to hopefully present you some information that will be helpful in choosing a college or a university, and then a major. This would I think be important for anybody who wants to study in the United States. I have been in my office about 3 years. Have taught at my university though for 25 years, and I taught French, and I had a great experience teaching a French major from Ukraine, and I discovered that because the Russian language doesn't use articles very much, it was a real challenge to teach a Russian speaker how to use articles in French, which are kind of annoying. So I have fond memories of that student, and we'd love to have more students. Just quickly, so you know where we are before we get going, we're a residential campus in the center of the state of Arkansas. It's spelled Arkansas, and there is a state called Kansas, but the S is silent. I think that's because it comes from a Native American language. So we say Arkansas, as if it was spelled SAW. We're a campus of about 10,000 students. We have about 400 students from 70 different countries. We have a really good intensive English program on campus, which offers online courses. And when we talk about the kind of universities in the United States, we are a public regional university. So when you, there are many, many public regional universities throughout the United States, and really most of us offer the same degree programs. So you can see that we offer 86 undergraduate degrees, 35 masters, and 7 doctoral programs. And when I say that we are a comprehensive public regional university, we're comprehensive because we offer 86 undergraduate majors. But we're not a Research One institution because we only have a limited number of doctoral programs and, as you can see, 35 master's degree programs. On the bottom left for me of the screen, you'll see the most popular majors with international students at UCA. If you have questions about the programs we offer, we can get into that later. We have a beautiful campus. The state of Arkansas is in the Mid-South, so that's north of Louisiana, which borders the Gulf of Mexico. And Texas is to our south. Of course, south of Texas, you get to Mexico, but Texas is a very big state. It's the same size as France. So it's a long way to drive to Mexico from Arkansas, but we don't have any big cities in Arkansas. The biggest city is Little Rock, about 350,000 people. There are about 3.5 million people in Arkansas. So it's a rural state with a lot of beautiful natural beauty. But you can see there are some big cities, Dallas, New Orleans, Memphis, so some big places to visit. All right, I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Dr. Matt Smith, and I'll join you in a bit to talk about how to choose a major.
Thank you, Dr. Phil.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt. Like Katerina mentioned, I'm a DSO and I work in admissions, international admissions applications. I'd like to I'll just continue where Dr. Bailey left off. He talked about different university campus sizes. And in the United States, there are large research state institutions like UC Davis, California, Louisiana State University, University of Arkansas is about 3 hours away from where we are, and Texas A&M, Rutgers University in New Jersey. These are huge campuses with lots of research programs and lots of grants. There are, in the same category, there are prestigious private research universities like Drexel in Philadelphia, Johns Hopkins, Cornell, Columbia University, Rice University in Houston, Texas. Again, these are very large-scale research-focused universities. Then comes master's comprehensive public state and regional universities like UCA, University of Central Arkansas. And these are smaller, cozier campuses in different cities across the United States. There's another one in our state, Arkansas State University, close to Memphis, Tennessee. And the next categories are, this is baccalaureate colleges, like liberal arts focused colleges, like Hendrix in Conway, Arkansas, DePaul, St. John's, as well as the Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. And smaller colleges offer 2-year degrees, associate degrees, and special focus institutions like these institutions focus on different areas, and their degrees cover health-related, technical-related, business-related, or faith-related areas, and they have these kind of curricula. Now, in numbers, what do these mean? There are about 1,600 associate degree granting universities, 2 years colleges, we call them. About 2,400 bachelor's or higher degree, 4 years and master's colleges, and over 400 higher education institutions that award research doctorates. Now, of course, the focus is different in each one of these categories. Now, I'll continue with numbers, which will be related to your goals and your ambitions. This table is from about 3 years ago, so it's a bit outdated, but you may want to add about 10% increase to these numbers. So with 2-year public colleges, your total cost with tuition, room and board is about to be $13,000 per year. But you can only attend these schools for 2 years, and you can get an associate degree, and you can continue your education at a at a university in the United States for the remaining 2 years. If you want to start at a public 4-year college, then the cost is a bit higher. It's going to be around $22,000, $23,000 per year. Whereas at private 4-year colleges, this cost doubles or even sometimes triples to go over $50,000 per year. So this is an important consideration in your decision-making process. I'd like to give you brief information about what our numbers are. We are a unique institution in the United States. We offer a scholarship to students who live in our campus, on campus housing. With that, the annual cost goes down significantly. As you see in the highlighted part in this table, it goes down $7,000 based on 15 credit hours per term. So not every school does this in the United States. So this gives us a unique advantage in terms of cost. Now, before going to the major, should we
want to switch to?
I can start and go through this.
Yes.
paper.
Yes. Now, Dr. Bailey will continue with finding the best university for yourself, and then we'll have questions and answers. Thank you.
Yes, I want to remind our audience that you may leave your questions in the chat box, and we will have time at the end of the presentation to address your questions.
In fact, we'll be pausing shortly for questions here in a minute. So as you look at the university that you want to choose, and we're going to talk about a major as well, you have to consider a lot of different factors. Okay, there's a lot of options, and sometimes students don't know what they want to major in, much less what kind of university they want to study in. So I think one of the most important things to try to do is to try and figure out what subject you want to study. A lot of our students that start at our institution do not know. We call them undecided, and that's fine. One of the strengths of the American higher education system is that it allows students in their first year to explore different topics through something called the general education program. And so you don't have to know what your career choice is when you start. Unlike, say, in France, they specialize in the first year at university. And if you're going to study chemical engineering, you start your first year and you study chemical engineering. Whereas in America, we have a general education program, and it asks you to study a little bit of a lot of the topics that you guys study in your senior year in high school, or for your baccalaureate in the French sense of the degree that sanctions the secondary school, okay? So it's more common for Americans to be choosing their major after they arrive at the university. For international students, you do have to know at least tentatively what major you want to choose, because when you go to get your visa, it's more convincing to tell the visa officer what you want to study and why you want to go to that university. Sometimes they can be a little bit suspicious, and so knowing details about the university that you're going to and why you want to study there and why you want to study, let's say, business in Kentucky, that's important to know. So doing your research, that's important. Different universities have different application criteria. So, for instance, a university like mine, you don't have to have a SAT exam just to apply, or an ACT exam. You don't have to write an essay to apply, but other institutions that are much more competitive for entrance, they will require SAT, ACT exams, and writing an essay. So you've got to understand how competitive each institution is. Some universities in the United States are privately run and may not be accredited. And that accreditation is a very important factor, because if you can do an online degree sometimes with a business college, but if it's not accredited, your degree won't be worth much. So you can always check on any university's website which organization is accrediting the school. The other thing you want to consider is just yourself, okay? Practical considerations like, do you want to be at a school that has Division I athletics for football and basketball and that sort of thing? Americans are crazy about sports. So for American students, going to a school that has Division I athletics can be a factor. And my university does have Division I athletics. The area of the country can be important. I'm originally from Minnesota, which is up near Canada. It's very cold up there in the winter, probably not unlike Ukraine. Some people don't like the cold, so they prefer to come down south. You might want a religious institution. All right, we have a lot of private religious institutions in many different denominations. That could be a concern. If you want to have close interaction with your professors for your first degree, you'll want to choose a smaller school. Matt mentioned some of the big state research schools have enrollment each year of over 60,000 students. So at the University of Minnesota or Wisconsin or Michigan, you're going to have a huge campus, and it's going to be hard in your first semester to get to know professors because they won't be teaching your first year class. At a lot of the big schools, graduate students do the teaching. And the grad students are very smart. They're doing a master's or PhD, but they're not trained teachers per se. And I can tell you from teaching 25 years, teaching is not something you're born with. You learn to do it. So at a smaller university, public regional like my university, you don't have grad students teaching. So when you walk into a psychology class for the first time, you'll find a professor with a PhD. And whereas if you go to the University of Arkansas or the University of Minnesota, you might have a very smart young person who doesn't really know how to teach. And that can make all the difference in your success. So finding the right size and the right fit is very important. When it comes to teaching style and your learning style, that's also important. American education is a little bit different than I'll compare to France because I don't know Ukraine. But in France, they have more of a what they call a amphitheater style classroom. Huge classrooms. The professor stands up and pontificates, which is a fancy word for talks about their topic. And maybe the professor doesn't care if you show up to the lecture or not, because to get credit for the class, you have to pass the final exam. In America, it's a lot different. We take attendance. We want discussions taking place, interaction. And you can tell how much interaction you'll get by the size of the university and the number of students in the class. So if you ask me, what's the average number of students per professor at UCA? I'll say 17 to 1. Okay, that's a good number of students per professor. That means most of your classes, you'll have less than 40 students. Okay, in your third or fourth year, you'll have less than 20 in many of your upper division classes in many programs. If you go to a real big school, your first year, you could have classes with 200 or 300 students. And that means that you'll have less chance to meet the professor and talk to the professor. So the other factor you might want to find is, does the school have a significant number of international students? I always think if you're from Ukraine, it's great to go to some place where there are not a lot of students from the Ukraine, because that way you'll be standing out. You'll be kind of special. Americans do love international students. Notwithstanding our previous president, we do love the rest of the world. And international students are sometimes seen as, not sometimes, but in most college towns in the United States, they're seen as really key to the diversity of the community. You also kind of want to figure out where your university is. Is it in a big city? Is it in a small town? Because the cultural life surrounding the university will be affected by the location, of course. We're going to get into the affordability question when I start talking about a major here in a second. But I'll just use my example of my two daughters because it's very practical. I have two daughters that graduated from college recently. One, the oldest one, Emily, always wanted to come to my university. And as a father, I made the mistake of telling her when she was 15, well, Emily, you can go to a better school. She's a very bright girl. You can go to a bigger school. Well, of course, that put a lot of pressure on her. That was not good. And finally, I realized how stupid that was. And so I was quite happy that she did a double major in chemistry and biology, chemistry and Spanish at my university, and graduated in 4 years, had no college debt because we're affordable, right? And then she got a job in the local high school teaching chemistry in her first year. So she is doing very, very well. My second daughter, Anna, is a brilliant young woman. She wanted to be a biomedical engineer student. And I couldn't even pronounce biomedical engineering back then. So I don't know how she came to think about doing that. But she ended up going to Johns Hopkins University, which is the #1 biomedical engineering program in the United States. But the cost of attendance at Johns Hopkins is $80,000 a year. That means tuition and housing and food and books. The cost of attendance at my university is $20,000 a year. So the only way my daughter could go to Johns Hopkins was she got a scholarship. And so what I used to tell my daughter, okay, in looking at going to that school, I used to tease her and I said, well, if you wanted to study psychology or history or, sorry, I keep playing with the mouse. If you wanted to study psychology or history or any number of majors that are offered at every university in the United States, I wouldn't send you to Johns Hopkins. But for biomedical engineering, yes, that program is the best in the world. Sometimes it's ranked number 2 or 3, but it's a fantastic program. And we don't offer it at our school, and it's not offered at a lot of places. So when you're looking at your value for money, if you want to study business and it's your first degree, it's not really cost effective to go to Harvard for your first undergraduate degree. If your parents are very wealthy and money is not an issue, then by all means, go to the best school with the best prestige. But for many first degrees, you're better off going to an affordable institution where you can get a really good quality education. And then for your master's or PhD, you can move on to a better, more famous institution higher up in the so-called rankings, okay? You can see a couple of the other categories there. I'll just touch briefly on how competitive the schools are. If you're going to one of the more prestigious schools, or even a big school, let's say the University of Michigan, it's a really good state school, the flagship school in Michigan, they get like 60,000 applicants a year, 60,000. And so they have rigorous review of applicants, and maybe they'll only admit, of the 60,000, maybe they'll only admit 15,000 a year. So you can ask any university, what is their acceptance rate, okay? And a university like mine has more or less open enrollment. In other words, if you meet the minimum qualifications, we will accept you. All right, so let's say you've chosen a university. How do you choose your major? All right, one issue I see a lot with international students, well, with all students really, is mom and dad think they know best. And they'll say, you need to study business, or you need to study to be a lawyer, or you need to study to be a doctor, okay? And that's great if the student wants to do that. But if your heart is in art and you want to be a filmmaker, okay, or you want to be a writer, or you want to be a counselor in psychology, if you come to American University to start studying, and you really, like, say you're doing math, all right, and maybe you're not real good at math, but your dad is in finance, and math is key to finance, so you're starting in math. If you don't like it and it's hard for you, you will not do well, all right? If you like the topic you want to study, you will probably work harder. And the key to finishing your degree in America is hard work and a little bit of intelligence. But if we admit you to the school, you're intelligent enough to get a college degree. And yet, in over a 6-year period, only 45% of students who start at my university finish. All right? Because university life is hard. So the majority of students don't finish their degree. So coming and choosing the right major is key. Whoops, wrong direction again. All right. So when you're looking at your major, if it's generalized psychology or business, okay, definitely choose the university that gives you the best financial aid package, and that is the most cost effective. You'll get an excellent psychology degree at my university, okay? You'll have professors with PhDs in the first year, And that will be true of almost any comprehensive public regional university in the United States. But if you go to a huge state school, or even to Harvard or Yale, you probably won't have a professor with a PhD teaching you in your first year. And that affects the quality of education, even if you're paying a lot for it. And that's how you determine the good value, all right? There are accreditations for certain programs, like in business. There's the Association of Accreditors of College Business Programs, AACSB. Only 5% of the world's business programs have that accreditation. And you might ask, does your business school have that accreditation? Ours does, and so it's a very quality program for an affordable price. A couple more questions, then I'm gonna let you, a couple more statements, and then I'll let you guys ask questions. So one of the things you want to look at when you're choosing a major is what will the world be like in 30 years, okay? And of course, you don't know what the job market will be in 30 years. I'm a fairly old man, and when I was a kid, we had 3 television channels, and of course, there was no internet. There was no cell phones, okay? So when I was a student, I majored in French and humanities. And humanities is another name for liberal arts. It's a little bit of history, a little bit of English literature, a little bit of philosophy, okay? I went to a private liberal arts college in Minnesota. Well, a liberal arts major is a fantastic preparation for my work nowadays in the international office, because I've got to be able to speak publicly. I've got to be able to talk to faculty members, and knowing a little bit about how to think critically and just a little bit of the things that I know, that's allowed me to be moving in different roles and become a leader on campus. You can't necessarily predict where you're going to be, but if you focus too soon on one discipline, you may find that in 30 years, that discipline's not much in demand. I have a good friend, and he's an architect, and he worked for years in commercial building. Well, now he's unemployed. He's 61 years old, and we're not doing much building of commercial buildings for shops, right? Everything's on the internet. So that particular market for architects has changed. So the lesson for this is, and I'm just going to be honest, it doesn't really matter what major you choose. It could be art, it could be photography, it could be theater, music, computer science, engineering, all right? Yes, certain majors in your first 10 years will have a better salary. But if you get a college degree, and this is true for America, so I'm sure it's true in Ukraine, if you get a college degree, you will be in the minority of people in your country that have a college degree. And it doesn't matter what the major is, because if you have a college degree in America, it tells me that you are disciplined, you're focused, you can do 6 things at the same time. So in the end, it's the most important thing is to do something you love and do it with passion. And one way to negotiate with your family is to double major, to do 2 degrees. And I've read studies on this, because as a foreign language teacher, we always tell our students to try and do 2 majors, French and international relations, or French and international trade, or French and chemistry, right? So one of the studies I saw found that there are prestige majors like business and biomedical engineering, and other majors that aren't so prestigious, like art history, okay? And amongst international students, some students were doing 2 majors. And when they were asked why, they said, I'm doing 1 for my parents and 1 for me, all right? Well, if you do 2 majors and you do 1 in a liberal arts and 1 in a technical field, you are going to be a very high demand graduate because you'll have people skills, the soft skills you need to succeed in an office and to lead people, but you'll also have practical knowledge, be it in computer science or in business. So don't hesitate to think about a double major, because increasingly in the United States, universities are making that easier and easier. All right, with that, we're going to pause and let you ask a couple questions now about what we've been talking about.
Okay, so thank you so much for the presentation, for the information. I do have a couple of questions. We've just discussed about the different, like that universities may offer different programs, and it might be a different teaching styles and different requirements. So how do our students look for this information? For example, about teaching style. Is it something that they need to reach out to university and ask, or there is a place on website that the universities usually specifically describe the program or the syllabus or something, yeah, etc. Mm-hmm.
So I think there's like 3 ways to approach that. One is to understand the nature of higher education in the United States. If I ask what is the annual enrollment of a given university, I can predict the interaction in the classroom in many ways, okay? Mm-hmm. So if I know that the University of Michigan has 60,000 students a year, and they're a Research One university, meaning their most prestigious professors have to publish books and earn research grants to make money. Well, those professors maybe teach 1 or 2 classes a semester, okay? What does that mean? They're being paid to do research and to earn grant money from the government or from private sector. They're not being paid to teach. Mm-hmm. Well, who do they teach? Some of those professors only teach master's and PhD students. And if you want to do a graduate program, by all means, choose one of the research institutions with the best prestige. But if you want to do your first degree, you'll show up that first year and you will not get that PhD professor in the class. You'll get one of his or her grad students. And as I've said, that may not be the same experience. Also, the larger the university, the more financial pressure on that university to have large class sizes in the first and second year. Every university has some sort of, well, not every university, but most universities have a general education program, all right? I was surprised when my daughter went to Johns Hopkins, they don't have general education. She started like they do in France and maybe like they do in Ukraine in biomedical engineering. That's all she did. Well, she did a couple other things, but she didn't do the same thing that we do at most institutions as far as having gen ed. But the universities have to have a lot of students in each class to generate tuition revenue to support other programs with small enrollment. So the larger the university, the larger the class size is going to be that first couple of years. Mm-hmm. However, you're going to get more opportunity for diversity of academic opportunity at a large university. They're going to have more technical fields. So it depends on what you want to study, whether you want to pay for it. And like I said, you don't want to be paying for a psychology at the most expensive school, not the first degree. For your PhD, sure, but not for that first degree. You can ask any college admissions representative, what is your faculty to student ratio? I said that ours is 17-1. Well, that's a good intimate level of interaction. You can ask, what is your faculty student ratio in the first year courses? All right. Mm-hmm. And it might be 40-1, but then you might ask, so I want to study biology. What is the faculty to student ratio in the biology program? A department chair, the person who's leading the program, will know the answer to that. Okay. It can be a little bit intimidating and dehumanizing to arrive on a big college campus and not get the personal attention you need to thrive. Our flagship institution in Arkansas is called the University of Arkansas. It's not a huge institution. We have about 10,000 students. They have about 17,000, I think. But the difference is they are the flagship school. They're a Research One institution. And that means they have way more grad students teaching. They have the first year classes that are very large because that's just the model of higher education at that type of school. So even though Michigan has 60,000, University of Arkansas has 17, the experience in the first year is going to be very similar, okay? Mm-hmm. Whereas at my institution, we just don't have that many graduate programs. And because we don't have that many graduate programs, we don't need to have courses taught by grad students.
Okay,
and
thank you. Mm-hmm.
Next question, I guess.
No, if you have some more information, we would...
No, that's all right. Next question is fine.
Okay, so if I choose the double major, double degree, does it affect my tuition cost?
No. It could affect the number of years it takes for you to finish, okay? So normally you want to finish in 4 years. But at my school, you can finish 2 degrees or 2 majors in 4 years. So like my daughter, Emily, she did Spanish and she did chemistry, and she also did teacher education, which was the equivalent of a minor, another 6 courses. But she did all that in 4 years. You have to do some classes in the summer to make that happen. But the ease of doing double majors sometimes also depends on the discipline. It's easier to major in English and history or French and international relations to do those 2 than it is to do chemistry and Spanish like my daughter did. But there's some degree requirements, but it's still doable. The key to that is you need to determine your first year that you want to do it and not change your major. If you change your mind, that's fine. Mm-hmm. American university students change their major all the time. But if you do that, it's going to mean that you finish in 5 or 6 years. I will say, at my institution, when I say only 45% graduate, right, that's over 6 years because many students do not finish in 4 years. Mm-hmm. But it is possible to finish in 4 years if you know what you're doing.
Great. Thank you so much for the information. Okay, a student asking, I believe this is a prospective graduate PhD student who is aiming at the position with funding. So she's asking, the main factor of choosing the university will be choosing the one that offers the best researchers in the area. Is it correct?
Yes. I mean, the fact of the matter is, for many graduate programs, they have funding for something called a graduate assistantship or a teaching assistantship. And it depends on the field. Mm-hmm. If you want to study a foreign language like French or Spanish, I used to be the chair of the department. I would tell students, if you want to go to grad school, do not go unless you get funding, because that means you're not good enough. Because the universities, basically, they use those young graduate students to teach, and so they can afford to pay their tuition, okay? Mm-hmm. So if you can't get a TA-ship or a graduate assistantship in the say liberal arts, humanities, anything in the arts, it's a sign that maybe you're not competitive enough. However, in a very competitive field like cybersecurity or computer science or business, they don't have graduate assistantship funding. Why? Because they have more students than they can teach. All right. So even at my school, for our MBA program, the competitiveness of the entrance means you don't get funding. My son-in-law is doing the PhD in physical therapy at my institution, and it's very competitive. His grades were very good, and he did not get offered any funding. They don't have to offer any funding. And at our PhD program, the students don't do any teaching. And again, at a large institution where PhD students are doing teaching, then you should expect funding.
Mm-hmm.
But so it kind of depends on the discipline whether or not funding is available for graduate attendance. I think in short, if you're going to do a master's or a PhD, generally speaking, you should expect to be paying a substantial amount of money towards the cost of the program.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the answer. And I have one more question, and I think this is the last one. What about the interests represented in your states? Can the student who is actually interested in some industry or in a company look for university that this company is hiring from, like the graduates from? Is it a good idea to see what industries are developed and then in the area, and then just to go and see what universities are represented in the same area, for example, for OPT options? Is there any information on the university website that you probably partner with some companies, or we work with the companies?
There definitely will be some universities that have partnerships with local business.
Mm-hmm.
In Arkansas, our computer science department has relationships with a company called Axiom. Axiom is a great big database company. They're responsible for a lot of the silly mail we get about credit cards, but they keep track of all the data for credit card spending, and so that company is working in close consultation with our computer science department. They even provide some funding and internship opportunities for students. So yes, in many fields there will be relationships between the private sector and the university, and those would definitely lead to OPT options. The other thing I'd say about that is the major of finance, okay, which is a popular major for us, for international students, is not as effective a major for OPT purposes in Arkansas as something like management information systems. Why? Because we don't have a huge financial sector in our major capital, Little Rock. So if you wanted to be a finance major and get a good OPT in finance, all right,
Mm-hmm.
You could study in Arkansas, no problem, but you have to be ready to go to Atlanta or some other big city to get your OPT. You won't find it locally. So that's a consideration. Finding, but really, as long as you're willing to go anywhere in the United States, your OPT options will be available.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There is a question about the master programs curriculum. Since we discussed just the bachelor's degree and PhD degree, a student is asking, is any wiggle room when it comes to master's programs curriculum?
Wiggle room. That's an interesting term. I'm not sure I understand the application to master's programs, but can you?
Well, yeah, if you can elaborate your question, would be great. I believe that since we discussed already the PhD, what's the best for PhD students, and you just advised for the PhD students and for the bachelor students. So in terms of the master's programs, is there any, nuances, anything that should be considered?
So let me say something I forgot to say when answering about graduate programs earlier, and
Sure.
funding. When you're looking for a master's program or PhD program, it's very important to do the research about the faculty in the program.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get funding, it's the faculty are going to choose who gets funding. So if they accept 10 graduate students a year, maybe only 2 or 3 get funding. All right. So when they want to know what your research plan is, they want to know why you're choosing their university. And ideally, you'll know the research for the faculty members in the department. You'll have done your research. And you might want to flatter them in an email saying, oh, Professor Smith, I love your article about this topic. I'd love to come study with you. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And let it be known that you have a unique, specific interest in the courses and the program they offer. And that is ultimately how you are going to get chosen as a graduate assistant, not just on your smarts, but also on how much you've prepared. And so that would be the same for a master's program or a PhD. But of course, when you're choosing the master's, you should think about whether you're going to do a PhD when you choose your school. So if you choose a master's program at UCA, okay, yeah, we have 35 different master's programs. We only have 7 doctorates, okay? So if you do a master's at a public regional university, it's likely you will have to transfer to another school to do a PhD. There's nothing wrong with that, but when I did my PhD in French, I did a master's at the University of Virginia, and I did my PhD at the University of Virginia. And I was happy to do it that way. So you've got to check when you're starting that master's, is that the last degree I'm going to go and do?
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, in certain fields, it's not cost effective to get a master's or a PhD because you won't earn more money, all right, with a PhD. If you want to teach, yeah, do the PhD. But if you want to make money, do an undergraduate degree in computer science and start working. Would a master's degree help you in computer science? Maybe a little bit, only on the margin. So it depends on the field, how much education you need.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much. So going back to the previous question, the question was, since we discussed double major, so is it possible to do the same with the master's degree?
You know, that is very, very uncommon, I think. However, I just hired someone in my study abroad office who completed 2 masters in German, one in German, one in international relations. So it is possible if the 2 master degrees are closely related disciplines, okay? Maybe you could get a master's in international business and international health, global health, right?
Mm-hmm.
Management, let's say. But that's probably going to take you, you know, an extra year or 2 to do that. And I would make sure I have a plan about why I'd want to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you so much for the information, for a lot of useful information. I have a lot thank you notes from our audience to you. They say it was really useful and a lot of great advices. And I think we're almost close to the end of our webinar. And thank you so much, Dr. Philip. Thank you so much, Matt, for the presentation. And we're happy to host the university in Ukraine. And we have your contact information, and we would gladly, we're looking forward for our future events together. Thank you, everybody who watched us, and have a nice rest of the day to you, Dr. Philip and Matt, and have a nice rest of the day for us.